You reach for your phone before your eyes are fully open. That is not a weakness. That is a reflex you inherited. In 2014, Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia locked people in a bare room for 15 minutes with nothing but their own thoughts. One button that delivered a real electric shock. 67% of the men pressed it. They chose pain over an empty room. Now picture a whole life with no button. That was every human who came before you. No screen, no music, no book. Just a body of fire and hours of nothing. So how did ancient humans kill boredom? Most people assume they didn't have any. That prehistoric life was one long emergency hunt. Run, bleed, sleep. It wasn't. In 2019, Mark Dybel and his team at Cambridge and UCL tracked 359 AGTA people in the northern Philippines, recording what every person was doing at intervals from 6 inches the morning to 6 at night. The foragers worked around 20 hours a week. The ones who had switched to farming worked around 30. 10 extra hours gone in farming is the thing we call progress. So they had the time, around 50 waking hours a week of it. Tonight, we are going to spend one of those evenings with them. One camp, one fire 35,000 years ago, in a limestone valley in southern Germany. The sun drops behind the ridge and the temperature falls with it. 14 people are sitting outside a cave mouth in the Ache Valley. The day's work is finished. The meat is cooked. Nobody has anywhere to be for the next 5 hours, and nobody will have anywhere to be tomorrow either. Now some of you are thinking, they weren't bored, they were exhausted. Fair question. And the answer comes from Frank Marlowe of Cambridge, who spent years living with the Hadza of Tanzania. His colleague Kristen Hawkes recorded something she found genuinely puzzling: Hadza men spending huge stretches of the day simply sitting in camp, often asleep with the food already secured. Not recovering, not preparing, sitting. They were bored, and they had no idea that was supposed to be a problem. So watch what fills the gap. First, the talk changes. In 1974, Polly Wiesner of the University of Utah sat down among the Jew/Honzi in northwest Botswana and did something almost nobody had done. She wrote down what people actually talked about and what time of day they said it. 174 Conversations. She published the comparison in PNAs in 2014, and the split is brutal. Daytime talk, 34% complaints and criticism, 31% food, trade, hunting, 16% joking, stories, 6%. Then the sun goes down and the fire comes up, and the same people become different people. 81% of night conversation is stories. Economic talk collapses to 4%. Complaints drop to 7%. Read that again. The practical human dies at sunset. The one that comes out after dark is the one that built everything you own. So at our fire in the Ache Valley, somebody starts talking. Not about tomorrow's hunt. About a man 3 valleys over who married a woman from a group nobody has met. About a grandfather who could hear animals underground. About what happens to you after you die. Second, someone is very good at it. In 2017, Daniel Smith and Andrea Migliano at UCL studied storytelling among the AGTA and published the result in Nature Communications. They asked camps who they most wanted to live with. The best storytellers were chosen more often than the best hunters. Camps with strong storytellers cooperated more, shared more, gave more away, and the storytellers themselves had more children than everyone else. Sit with that. In a world where your survival depended on protein, the person who was best at making the night interesting out-reproduced. The person who was best at killing dinner. Being entertaining was not a side skill. It was a mating advantage. Third, someone makes a noise on purpose. In 2008, Nicholas Conard from the University of Tübingen pulled 12 fragments of bone out of the floor of Hohlefels cave. Reassembled, they were a flute carved from the hollow wing bone of a griffon vulture. 5 finger holes, a V-shaped notch cut into the mouthpiece for the lips. He published it in Nature in 2009. It is around 35,000 years old, and it plays. Somebody sat in the cold and worked a bird's arm bone with a stone blade until it produced a note. That takes hours. It feeds no one. It kills nothing. And the holes are spaced deliberately, which means it was not the first one. Somebody had already failed at this and gone back and done it again. Fourth, someone scratches something. Long before this night in a cave on the South African coast, a human picked up a flake of stone and drew on it with an ochre crayon. 6 straight lines crossed by 3 curved ones. Christopher Henshelwood published it in Nature in 2018. Dated to 73,000 years old. It is the oldest known drawing made by a human hand. It is not a bison. It is not a map. It is not a message. It is a crosshatch pattern. It is a doodle in the margin of the notebook. 73,000 years before there were notebooks. Fifth, they gamble. Marlowe documented Hadza men playing a game with flat wooden discs, throwing them against a rock and betting on how they landed arrowheads, beads. Tobacco changing hands, sometimes for hours. No survival value. No nutrition. Pure invented risk, manufactured because the afternoon was too flat. And then they dance. At our fire, someone stands. The rhythm is hands and stamping feet, and it goes on past midnight, past the point of tiredness, into somewhere else. The Jew/Honsi that Wiesner sat with held these all-night dances several times a month, and people came in from other camps to join. Nobody is paid. Nobody is watching from outside. It keeps going until it stops. A group of tired, hungry people voluntarily staying awake all night for nothing. And notice what the fire is doing to all of this. Wiesner's whole point was that firelight extends the day at exactly the hours when no work can be done. You cannot forage in the dark. You cannot nap a blade properly in the dark. What you can do is sit in a circle of orange light where everyone's face is visible and nobody can leave. And that is the room where human culture was actually written. Now look at what all 5 of those things have in common. Not one of them was consumed. Every single one was made. Nobody at that fire received entertainment. They generated it out of an empty evening, using nothing but a bird bone, a rock, a story, and each other. The boredom came first. The fluke came second. Boredom was the raw material. And here is the flat truth, the one nobody wants to say out loud. Your phone did not solve boredom. Your phone destroyed the only thing boredom was ever good for. Because that empty, itchy, unbearable feeling, the one you now delete in under 4 seconds, is a pressure. It has one exit. You have to make something. Cave humans had no way to release that pressure except through their hands and their mouths. So the pressure came out as flutes, as drawings, as gods, as jokes, as music. You have an exit now. It is in your pocket. It opens instantly and it never runs out. So the pressure never builds, and nothing ever comes out the other side. 67% of the men in that Virginia lab shocked themselves, rather than sit alone for 15 minutes. The people at Whole Fells sat with it for 5 hours every night, all winter, for their entire lives. And that is why we have their flute. And they have nothing of ours. Tonight you will lie in bed and scroll until your eyes hurt. They lay in the dark and told each other about people they had never met. You will consume more images before lunch than they saw in a decade. They made 6 lines and 3 curves on a piece of stone, and we are still looking at it. You have never in your adult life been bored for more than about 4 seconds. They were bored for hours, every single day, and out of that came music, art, story, and every god humans have ever prayed to. They were not more creative than you. They were not smarter than you. They just had no way out of the silence, so they built something inside it. You have a way out. That is the entire difference. And that thing you keep meaning to make, the drawing, the song, the story, the business. The thing you talk about and never start it does not need more time. It needs an empty evening you refuse to fill. So here is the only question that matters. When was the last time you were bored? And what did you build with it?